We were going a little fast. And I remember, saying to Josh, slow down. And I remember saying something along the lines of, we're going to get hit. They're going to hit us.
No one's immune. In this business, a lot of times we think that, we're supposed to go rescue people, and our job's to get there quickly and to save lives. And in order to do that, we have to be able to get to the place we're going. And so many times we think that because we're in the ambulance and we're going to save somebody's life, that we're not in trouble. We can't possibly get in an accident on the way there.
We were responding, my partner and I were responding out into a very rural area where we had a report of a 3-year-old child that had been burned in a house explosion, and that we were the only medical aid that was available to go to that child. And it was a day that was severe storms, rains, and high winds. And with children, sometimes you do stupid things and you push the pedal a little harder than you should, and that was the situation here. And I basically lost control of the vehicle out on a rural road when I got hit with what the CHP had described as a 70-mile-an-hour gust of wind. And the vehicle was only traveling 45 before it left the ground. The vehicle rolled, and we immediately felt the seat belts cinch us up and hold us into our seats. And I don't wish that on anybody, but if it wasn't for the seat belt that held us into the seat, we probably would have not stayed in the vehicles.
I met Josh years ago when I started working here at AMR, and I was working at the Hyde Park station. I remember the day I met him. I remember it very clearly. He's unique in a lot of ways, and he has this aura about him, or an energy about him, that you just can't mistake, and he draws you in. People instantly love him. You spend 2 minutes in his presence, and you can't help but not love him. I mean, he's just a beautiful person, and he exudes this wonderful energy. And I thought it would be great to work with him, because there was a quality about him that wasn't just on a social level or personality-wise. He was probably one of the best in this industry. I mean, he was so non-judgmental, and he wasn't harsh in any manner as far as you did that wrong, or can't you get anything right, or never anything like that at all. He was really patient. Coming into work was something I looked forward to. Josh was at the stove scrambling eggs, and the tones went off, and we all just kind of looked at each other. There's a certain knowing, and sure enough, it was a patient in cardiac arrest. It was something I could feel, but it wasn't something I could describe, and it wasn't something I could really put my finger on, but it was something different from the minute we got into the ambulance. Your adrenaline pumps. You kind of get your mind into this mode, into the call. One of the reasons that Josh was so important to get to this call was not only because of patient care. Obviously, in a cardiac arrest, you need time is minutes. I mean, we all know that. One of the things is early defibrillation. And although we've all been trained in those skills, it's one of those things I had yet to experience. I personally had never defibrillated anyone. And Josh's thought on that day was that if he could get us there first, or before the medics, I would get an opportunity to have that experience. But I do remember feeling like we were going a little fast. I remember saying to him, slow down, what do you want to kill us on Thanksgiving? I remember reaching for gloves in the console and looking up and seeing the car on the right side. And I remember saying something along the lines of, we're going to get hit. They're going to hit us. Because it had been obvious to me that they were not really clear, that they had to stop. And there's that moment of, like, you wait, and it feels like forever. And but I knew that judging by the size of the ambulance and the length of the intersection, I just knew we were going to get hit. And Josh was like, hold on, I got it. And like he had seen them, but we did get hit. and the ambulance went over on its side. And I remember feeling like I was inside a dryer or a washing machine. And it almost was like time had stopped. And everything was acute, very acute, sound-wise, and I remember feeling like it was never going to stop. But what I didn't realize was not only did the ambulance tip, because I don't think I was even conscious that that's what was happening. I was conscious. I don't believe at any time did I lose consciousness. What I wasn't aware of was that the ambulance was sliding, and it slid for about 150 feet or so. Josh called out to me. He said my name twice. He said, "Allie, Allie, are you okay?" That was his only concern. And I answered him and I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And he said, "Allie, I'm stuck." And the fact that he had spoke led me to believe that he was okay.
It was a feeling of sheer helplessness, that the fact that I couldn't get out there quicker, couldn't get out here quicker, impeded my ability to do anything. Tremendous amount of frustration. Felt a full range of emotions driving out here. Got very angry at the fact that we could have an accident of this nature on Thanksgiving Day. Got very teary, the fact that we would have an accident of this nature on Thanksgiving Day. There was a lot of association in my mind. I couldn't stop associating the event with the holiday.
At that time, everything seemed very surreal. It was really difficult to absorb. It was very difficult to understand how something like this could happen. Not that I will ever understand, or anyone will ever understand. We are the rescuers. And when you're in that vehicle, you feel invincible. You know, this is not supposed to happen to you.
And then when I got there, it was just like automatic. I knew what I had to do for documentation purposes. I was having a problem with my camera. Wouldn't work, so we had to buy a disposable. And then I said, wait a minute, I have my videotape. So that's when I had to videotape the whole scene, get all the angles. And the hardest part for that was getting the skid marks and then realizing what I was seeing, going up to the ambulance and then physically seeing the last spot where he was laying at. So that was the hardest part.
And to this day, I can't believe the number of people who came up to me that night and told me, quote, that this was an acceptable loss, that we do hundreds of thousands, millions of transports a year, and if we lose one person a year, that that's acceptable, and that I should get over it, and there's nothing I can do to prevent it. And I don't believe that.
It's easy to ask the question to say, well, why don't I get a second chance? Or, you know, why is it that I have to wear my seatbelt every time? I almost think of the converse. You know, if I knew the time that Josh Hanson was going to be driving that rig and run that red light and not have his seatbelt on and we were going to have this horrible outcome, I'd have told Josh, this is the one call where it's extremely important that you make sure you come to a stop at the red light here, or always, you know, or this is the call that you need to wear your seatbelt on, because all those other ones, nothing ever happened. But this particular one, something's going to happen.
You know, I spent 15 years in the street as a paramedic, and I have extricated many patients from vehicles that had seatbelts in that are alive today. I've also responded to calls where people who did not have seatbelts on were not in the vehicle any longer, and I can tell you that the majority of our paramedics have witnessed the same situation. And that's why it baffles me at times that when you respond to these types of calls every day and you see the aftermath of that, you know, the good and the bad, why in God's name would you not buckle up your seatbelt? Doesn't make any sense to me.
There is not a sadder day than to sit in a pew in a church at a funeral and see a weeping spouse, to see a young child who sits there and wonders what's happened with their parent, and not know that, you know, that this is the final get-together before we go to the cemetery and we bury that individual. To see all of the fellow workers weeping at Josh's funeral, to see all the pallbearers come out, and as soon as they exited the church, they all put on sunglasses just like Josh used to wear. It was their final show of honor for Josh as they took him to the hearse and loaded his body into the back of that ambulance. To attend both of those funerals, to talk to our other employees who've lost limbs because they've come out of vehicles and they haven't bled out like Josh did, but they've suffered a tragic injury and are an amputee as a result. All of those things, I'm the top person in the organization. I'm responsible for making sure that those people had worn their seatbelts. Had any one of those people worn their seatbelts, they'd still be with us today.
It was just a big hole in the operation. And you could look around here for the first couple of months afterwards and people were walking around like zombies. They just couldn't believe it.
As time went on, it was difficult to understand how any of us, you know, how life would be without Josh, how life would be without one of us. This affects all of us, and that is part of why I'm here, you know, because it does affect all of us, and it's impossible to think that anyone could not have been affected by that day, and the magnitude of it, because again, this is not something that happens to people like us.
If it's a similar situation and we've got a patient there that's experienced extreme trauma, and I'm about to go in and start chest compressions on this patient, or to take a pulse, and I don't put my gloves on, you're probably going to say something to me, because you know that while that used to be admirable in EMS years ago, and it was almost a badge of honor to take that patient on and to risk myself to the blood, the bodily fluids, now you know that that's not necessarily a cool thing to do. And you'll tell me to make sure that I put my gloves on, or I put a mask on, or I keep my distance, or get out of the way, rookie, you don't know what you're doing here. We have to do the same thing in an ambulance, whether it's watching out when we get ready to take an intersection against a red light, whether it's that I don't put my seatbelt on, whether it's this patient may be HIV positive.
When you're out there, you need to make sure that you're conducting yourself in such a way that you do not cause injury to anyone else, that being your partner or someone else on the highway. You know, if you don't get to the scene of an emergency, you're not helping that person that is called needing your assistance, and that's not beneficial at all.
Death doesn't happen every day to us, but every time you blow that red light and you go through the intersection and you don't put your seatbelt on, you're taking a chance. It's like playing Russian roulette. The bullet won't hit you every single time you pull that trigger, but eventually it's going to get you. Do you want to take that risk?